Okay, I want to get into this album. Listeners often bring their own stories to instrumental music, but this album has a specific narrative. The life of a girl who ages as slow as mountains. Why that story?
I mean, that was the personification of an idea that it was kind of a starting place. When we wrote The Sun Rose Into View, that was the first song that we really wrote, and it felt like the beginning of this project or this body of work, and it felt like a shift in our perspective of time, and we just started thinking and talking about that, and it became a theme in that kind of chapter of our lives, and that was a starting place that we used as a point of reference for the songs, and so they all kind of became, markers in relation to that storyline that then also formed. But it's a beautiful thing when a listener can just have their own experience of a thing as well, and I think that we would hope that everybody could also have their own experience in music.
I find that the our general, like the more overarching themes and intention for each song and for the album overall, that is usually when someone comes up and says, and tries to describe their experience of one of the pieces or of the whole record, those things are usually completely intact, and identical to our initial intention. I don't think it's necessary for people really to. I mean, the corollary narrative isn't necessary. That was just something that we use as a way to kind of find our way through the music and through the bigger themes. But that's not necessary for someone to understand the music.
I'm curious, though, about this idea. You said it's about a perspective of time. I mean, when I read the story, there were things I was imagining and implications. I'm curious, though, what you're thinking when you talk about that idea of a perspective of time.
Well, like the human perspective of time is one way, and compare that, say, to things in nature that have a very different lifespan, or animals that they're more sped up, or glaciers that just really stark differences. And so then Colin personified it into this girl, actually. Like we were kind of starting on an elemental level. I always think in terms of like the lifespan of a mountain or a tree. So something so slow in relationship to what we are, which is so fast.
Yeah.
And that was so abstract too. Like I think that feeling was there in The Sun Rose Into View of life speeding and flashing and things just rushing and roaring by, And so then that just became an interesting, like, let's look at that.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins describes it as middle world, this place that we exist in the cosmos, in terms of our temporal relationship. It's not a fruit fly, nor is it a redwood. And spatially, we are not planet. We don't exist on the macro like that, nor do we exist in the quantum.
Yeah.
So our understanding is very skewed, and so we were just trying to get at this different vantage points to look at ourselves and our own understanding from different places.
I was always also thinking about this phrase, slow as mountains, and to me the album has kind of a mountainous sound. The soundscape to me felt like a mountain. There's breath. There's also different layers. There's the lower sounds and the different range. Was that a consideration as well? That landscape and soundscape together?
Of course.
Yeah.
But I mean that naturally comes out of the instrumentation, I think, and out of our particular voices on our instruments.
But I have had mountains on the mind for a long time. Long time.
And there definitely is
those inner mountains.
There definitely is an arc. There's a progression, a deepening throughout the course of the record, where we start in a very pure place. The beginning of that piece, it's very stark, and then it grows. And by the second side of the LP, we're really dealing with that's the entrance of the contrabass clarinet, and so there's like the whole bottom just opens up, and that's ultimately where it ends. And so I feel like sonically it matches thematically what we're trying to do with her experience from point A to point B.
Okay, this might be a simple question, but what elements of sound do you use in the place of words in instrumental music? What are the different elements of sound that you employ?
Well, we always think, we think about it as storytelling, and so you can tell a story with words or music or visual art or whatever your medium is. And so I think that, verbal language is one way of telling a story, but we're just putting our story into this different medium.
But I'm just curious, what are the different elements of music, of sound? Like, what are you playing with? Is it texture as well as notes, as well as, like, what are the different elements that you draw upon to?
It's all of that.
It's all those things.
But it's not a conscious pairing of, like, this texture meeting this rhythmic.
I mean, for both of us, the visceral, the physical relationship with our instruments personally is where everything comes from. Like, fundamentally, everything that I do comes from a physical relationship with my instrument, and that has deepened over the years as my relationship has deepened, and my understanding of what it can do and what I can do, when paired with it.
Broadens your vocabulary. So
yeah, exactly. And so your voice just changes, and you have more to deal with. And I think, it's not quite so.
You don't think of it like this is the palette I
don't
have.
think about it intellectualized at all.
Yeah.
There's not that kind of picking and choosing. It's much more of because also both of us are improvisers, and a lot of or I think most of what we do, ultimately it's codified and it's through composed, but in the beginning, all of what we do is based on a very like visceral improvisation.
You each work solo. You also collaborate with bands, Arcade Fire, Bon Iver, for example. Is it different collaborating with just one person?
Yeah, for sure. And it is more like in terms of the way we write and having our compositions start out as like the seeds, our improvisations, that is much more of just a back and forth conversation. Like there isn't a whole room to go around, so we're really volleying our ideas and our styles together. And also the sort of the idea behind this project was to try to combine our solo projects, and we always thought that they might sound good together. Like, what if you played our records at the same time? Like that could be cool. But we combine them, and so I've never had a collaboration as such before, and I don't think Colin has either.
Definitely not. I mean, I was saying this before. I've brought different aspects of what I do by myself into different groups, into Bon Iver and Arcade Fire and others to a certain extent, but I'm just never like completely mapping what I do soloistically onto that new those other compositions. But with this, it's just straight up the two of us bringing, and I think that was pretty much the intention, bringing both of our solo presences together intact and seeing how that would.
That's interesting because usually you're right. When you'd enter a collaborative project, you're kind of trying to adjust or adapt to whatever's going on, whereas this is more of a pairing. You're saying.
But with this project, all of each of us can serve the project because the project is all of it.
Why does it work so well, you and Sarah?
Well, there's a lot of levels to that. That question unpacks all over the place. I don't know. It's always worked really well.
We have different musical backgrounds, but also a lot of similar reference points. We were both classically trained, but always improvised a lot, and we both studied jazz, and we both were firmly rooted in rock music and pop music. Like we just have a lot of the same reference points, and we've reached into different areas a lot as individuals and in our studies, like as young people as well. And so then when we met, we were very, I mean, we met in an interesting context. Bellercast Antibellas, like that show, super different worlds, like, and but there was just something about the way we both. There was a like, even though I wasn't watching you solo and you weren't watching me solo, but there was a way that we kind of gripped our instruments in a similar physical way, and we just sort of had something. There's a
kinship there that I think both of us, immediately saw and like gravitated towards with the two of us. So,
but it wasn't always easy. We tried various things over the years, more improv based. We played a lot of improv together, and
the pairing of our instruments is difficult.
It's difficult, and we would hit
difficult sounds to blend.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Also, I mean, just the straight up mechanics of it. I'm very loud.
He's super loud. And his frequencies bend a lot. That's a polite way of saying.
There's that. But she's terribly patient. And
no, but I mean, we reached a point where I took some time in the last few years to work on solo stuff and made that record, and I got to a point with my own solo composition and my voice where it felt like, I don't know, it felt like there was a way through, and it became really, really compatible in our last effort.
The places you were both at in your maturation as musicians. And you guys are also a couple.
Yeah, that's correct.
Does that make things hard sometimes?
No, not really.
No, if anything, it makes things very easy. I mean, one of the things is that Sarah's lived with my solo playing since our beginnings, and so if there's anybody who knows that aspect of me, that voice, and can kind of like see every move that I'm making before I make it, it's her. So it's made her the perfect person to collaborate with me in this particular context.
Do you guys feel like you're opening ears to a new style of music?
I would hope so. It's certainly not how we go about things when we're making music. Like, I can't wait to just broaden some horizons.
Yeah.
But I mean, the nature of the music is different, I guess, and compared to the mainstream. And so if we're able to enter through that mainstream and get some more people into something, maybe, and open some doors for them, that's a definite bonus.
Is that something you enjoy as well about what you do? Broadening,
for sure.
Noticing that you've broadened some people's horizons?
I love it when, I don't know how this happens, but people sometimes come up after one of our shows and they didn't know what they were going to see, and then they stayed, and then and then they've had this really enjoyable experience where they, that happened on our last tour where. Like, I don't know how that happens, actually, though. Like, how somebody ends up at our show. They have no idea what we're doing or, like, who we are or why they're there. They're
and
just,
it happens all the time.
They just are there. And then they're like, and then they buy the record, and they're like, that was, incredible. And then they have this story about it, and that's my favorite thing.
What do you guys hope an audience gets out of the live experience of this record?
I always hope that people just get some...
I mean, I said my eyes were closed, and you said perfect. I mean, is that what you're going for? That sort of meditative state, or any kind of effect?
I just want to alter. I want to alter their path for at least, even in the slightest way, just like a rock put in a stream, or just alter that water just ever so slightly. I want to just change something. If people step into it, I want it for them after they get out of it for their experience to have been altered in some tangible way.
Well, I like what you said about closing your eyes, because you didn't plan on closing your eyes. You weren't like gonna have a meditative experience.
Yep.
And that's what you did, and so it was a real experience. That was an authentic reaction to something that was really happening, and that's what I want is just for people to have an experience
in the moment.
Yeah, and we're having an experience, and so it's to share that and to connect with it is a really beautiful thing.
Really, the only reason to go about doing what we're doing and playing this music for people is to have that experience shared by everyone who's there, who's coming.
The experience that you're having shared by others.
Or just an experience together
Yeah.
without, removing yourself and having like a social media thing going on in your brain, or like without removing yourself.
And not inviting people into step into our into our clubhouse and check out how we do it. But rather, you get into a space and each space has its own personality, and each group of people has their own personality, and then we can all be that thing at that moment. We can all be something a little bit larger than our individual selves. We can be this bigger organism, and we can all share this one way of being for a little bit of time.
Great. Thank you guys for coming in.